Nostar, everyone. Good evening. Croeso. A very warm welcome to this evening's talk. I am delighted that our speakers, Sue Trankar, Chief Nursing Officer for Wales, Professor Keshav Singhal, and Judge Ray Singh are with us today to speak on the theme of From Girmit to Permit, the story of the Girmityas. This is a Welsh Asian Heritage Project's third monthly talk. Our monthly seminars provide a platform for wider debate around equality, migration, resilience, identity, culture, and heritage. And I hope everyone present today here will take an active part. My name is Parminder Dilyn, and I am the project leader for the Welsh Asian Heritage Project at the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Wales. We are a community engagement project with two aims: to celebrate and archive the experiences of Ugandan Asians in Wales, particularly those who came to the camp in Tonvenai, North Wales, after being expelled from Uganda in 1972. And the second aim is that we are telling the stories of the Welsh Asian communities through the recording of important places of cultural, religious, and historical significance. The Welsh Asian Heritage Project is funded as part of the Anti-Racist Wales programme. So just before we start, a couple of organizational points. We will finish very promptly at 6:30. You're welcome to ask questions at the end of our three speakers' contributions. Please write your questions in the question and answer function and not in the chat. We will be using the chat to post additional information for you. Tell us your name, and if you would like to be on camera when you're asking your questions, please use the virtual hand to indicate this, and we will try and make the session as interactive as we can. This evening's talk is going to be recorded, and we will share it on other platforms. So now to our talk for this evening, From Girmit to Permit. This is the story of the indentured labor system that brought 1.6 million Indian laborers to various colonial countries during the 19th and the early 20th centuries, following the abolition of slavery in the British Empire. So it is my great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, who is Professor Keshav Singhal. And Professor Keshav has been working on Asian heritage stories within Wales for a long time. He is an orthopedic surgeon at Bridgend and has lived in Wales for over 25 years. He is the governor of the India Centre in Cardiff and was and is also involved in the Anti-Racist Wales programme as a steering group member. He's a trustee of the Swansea University and also the Honorary Consul of Poland in Wales. He has been involved, as I said, with the preservation and showing of South Asian culture and heritage of Wales for the past decade, and is currently organizing an international conference on Girmityas, which he will say a bit more about, and which we will let you have the booking link for at the end of today's talk. Girmityas is the name given to the indentured laborers from India who were shipped to far-flung corners of the globe in the 19th and the 20th century after the abolition of slavery. The conference will be held on the 9th of May, and Professor Keshav will say a little bit more about this. So Professor Keshav, over to you now.
Thank you, Parminder. It's really a great pleasure to be here with you all this evening. So my first introduction to the word Girmit was in 2012. The High Commissioner of India in London at that time said to me, "We want to organize a conference on Girmit." And I was scratching my head. In Hindi, there is a word called girgit, which is a chameleon. So chameleon, and I said, why does he want to organize a conference on chameleons? I said, that doesn't make sense. But I couldn't show him my ignorance. So I went home and I did a bit of search. And then I found out it's not Girgit, but Girmit. And that whetted my appetite a little bit about what is this all about. But I must say, the inspiration for really delving deep into this and trying to organize a conference came to me from one of our esteemed participants, Professor Uzo Evobi. I was just, and Judge Racing, both of whom did so much to bring the Black Lives Matter to the forefront and made sure that the lay people became aware of Black Lives Matter and all the issues it was raising. And then I started looking into it a little bit more. So let us see, what is this Girmit? So the whole story starts when black slavery was abolished. And this suddenly left a huge labor shortage in the Caribbean countries and various other colonies because cheap labor was cheap or free labor, which was abused, was no longer available. So the empire started looking at its cash cow, India. And they said, okay, we don't have slaves now, but let us create a system whereby it is slavery in all but name, and a system of indentured labor was started. Indenture is a bond. So the recruiting agents went to the heartland of India, two states called Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Both these states were quite poor at that time. They were undergoing famine. And I'm talking of earliest Girmit was in 1826 and onwards. So they went there and they actually coerced and cajoled these completely illiterate and very poor people into signing an agreement. Now, these poor people had no clue of English, absolutely zilch, and they just wouldn't know what they're signing. They were given a lot of false promises, told that they'll be going to a glorious land full of milk and honey, they'll be earning so much, their life would be paradise, and so on. The bond was for 5 years. So for 5 years, they could not come back to their native land. And they were paid a princely sum of 8 rupees a month, which was £1 a month, which was to take care of all their basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter. So this agreement was signed, well, not signed, but thumbprinted. So that's where this Girmit to permit comes. So we had that agreement with the thumbprint, and now we have a biometric permit again with a thumbprint. Anyway, so this agreement was signed, but these poor people, they did not know English, so they couldn't pronounce the word agreement. So agreement became abbreviated to Girmit, and Girmit gradually became Girmit. So Girmit is basically an abbreviation of agreement. So the first wave of Girmit laborers were taken from India in 1826. And these people went to Reunion Islands, which were really a French colony. But the French and the British and the Dutch, all three competing superpowers, were working together on this one common aim, which is how to get plentiful, cheap labor which could be exploited for their respective colonies. However, the biggest numbers that were sent were to Fiji and Mauritius. And like we have the Windrush coming over in the post-World War II scenario, and it's become a symbol of all that was contributed to this nation by the Caribbean people. Likewise, the first ship that set sail and landed in Fiji was called Leonidas. And Leonidas came to Fiji on the 14th of May, 1879. So that day is now become a Girmit Day, International Girmit Day, 14th of May. Fiji and Mauritius together probably imported about 1 million odd girmitiyas as they're known. And then subsequently, a lot of other countries had these laborers, including Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, British Guyana, Suriname, which was a Dutch colony, and so on. The living conditions of these poor laborers was absolutely atrocious. They went through hell, deprivation, privations, beatings. So the only thing I haven't found in comparison to institutionalized slavery was they were not shackled. But apart from that, their masters could beat them at their whim, torture them, abuse them, starve them, withhold rations, and so on. The Mahatma Gandhi was probably one of the very first people way back in 1910 to raise his voice against indentured labor. And gradually this took traction, and gradually more and more people started decrying this very hateful process. So eventually, somewhere around 1920s, this process was abolished. But in the process, 1.6 million Indians had been taken away from their land into these foreign countries. They were not allowed to travel with their relatives unless that relative also was able to work hard in the fields. They were not allowed to marry. They were not allowed to have any house or property. But the important thing is that two things I found, which is very important in terms of these migrants. One is their resilience. So despite all the deprivations and despite all the torture and sufferings, they did not abandon their belief in a better future. A lot of them married local women. They went on to have children and they assimilated in their adopted country. They took over their language. For example, a lot of the Mauritian Girmitiyas will speak French as a first language. Their cuisine adapted to incorporate local cuisine into their daily food habits. And their clothing and culture also changed. But they did somehow cling on to their heritage, their South Asian Indian heritage, their religion. And even today, if you go and meet Girmitya and Mauritius or Fiji, who's probably fourth or fifth generation down the line, they still retain a lot of Indian culture and traditions. So the question is, why are we looking at this and why are we doing a conference on this topic? The answer is that this chapter has been completely whitewashed from the history books. And if you ask 100 people out there, what is Girmit or Girmitya? If you ask 1,000, I doubt if even a single person would know what it is. But the thing is that in the prosperity of the empire, in the prosperity of the country in which we are living today, the slavery, black slavery, and the Girmit system had a huge, huge role to play, because a lot of Western countries are built on the labor of the colonies. But the sad thing is, despite this, we are going through a phase where in most of the countries today, migrants are being demonized. They are being treated and touted as parasites. who are sucking lifeblood and wealth out of their host society. What people fail to realize is that these migrants are actually now part of the society. They have toiled and given their blood to build the society as their forefathers did, to build a better future for the empire. So I think it's very important that we recognize the contributions, not just of the Girmits, but also of the current day migrants. And speaking in terms of migration out of India, again, we'll touch on this in the conference. The first major migration was of the Roma Gypsies, which took place sometime in 13th century. And that was probably because of the various Turkic invasions into India from the northwest, that a huge number of tribesmen from Rajasthan and Punjab migrated out of India overland across the Middle East into Eastern Europe, and then gradually migrated westwards. So the Roma Gypsies are now nearly, shall we say, 800, 900 years down the line from having migrated first, but their language and the music still bears a fairly typical stamp of their Indian origin. The second wave of migration was the Girmits. The third wave came when Britain was going through an industrial revolution. And because of the industrial revolution, again, a lot of labor was needed. So a number of laborers came out from India. Then we had the professional wave of doctors, etc., probably somewhere in late 50s and going through 60s. And finally, we have a current wave of migrants, which are IT professionals. The thing is, whenever a migrant comes, that migrant injects a new energy into the country. And I think we need to realize that the migration is generally positive if it is well controlled, but migrants should not be demonized, which seems to be the problem right now. So what we are trying to tell the conference is that the ancient Indian concept was Vasudev Kutumbakam, which simply means this is one world and one earth and one family, and all our futures are interdependent. We cannot think that one part of the world will suffer, but I'll be insulated and I'll keep on prospering. And we know that now from Russia and Ukraine, we have absorbed the increasing price of gas and petrol. And likewise, whenever there is a conflict in one part of the world, the rest of the world is affected directly. So the conference that we are having is on 9th of May in the Senate. It's an all-day conference with representatives from South Africa, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Mauritius, and of course, UK and India and USA. It's the first time ever we will try and reimagine Girmit art through artificial intelligence, because the Girmit people are so absorbed in their daily survival that they didn't have any time for producing any art. So we have used artificial intelligence, and we'll be exhibiting that. We've got a specially commissioned documentary, which will be released on that day. In addition, you'll hear interviews from Girmit descendants. And again, the important thing about this is the resilience of the Girmitiyas and their vision for a better future. They skimmed and they starved to give their children education and make a better future for them. The second thing, as I said, was the important thing, very important thing, was that there was hardly any religious strife amongst the Girmitiyas. And they were united in a common purpose, that we are from India, whether we are Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, or whatever, we are, at the end of the day, we are Indians. And they were Indians living in a foreign country, and that gave them an impetus to stand united together. So communal and religious harmony was a big thing amongst this thing. We'll also have a discussion and a talk on parallels between African slavery and Girmit and the effects of that. So the conference is on 9th May at the Senate. Registration is free. there's an Eventbrite link, and Parminder will put this in the chat box. And we'd love to see you there. Tea and lunch would be provided because it's a rather long conference, but I'm sure it'll be illuminating and enjoyable. So I'm really grateful for the chance to talk to you. And thank you so much, Parminder.
Thank you so much, Professor Keshav. I think in a short time, you've taken us through a journey which has given us background information, because even today, even with the publication of this seminar, people still, they read what the seminar is about, but they still don't know what this is all about. It is truly a forgotten chapter of our history, which we want to support, to bring to people's awareness and to people's knowledge. And you were very right to make the present day connections. I mean, NHS being one place where they're constantly looking for a migration of talent to come and fill the NHS posts. But, you very succinctly put all the issues in regard to the conflicts as well as the history. So thank you very much. Thank you. And it's my pleasure now to invite Sue Tranka to be our next speaker. Sue was appointed as the Chief Nursing Officer for Wales and Nursing Director of NHS Wales in the summer of 2021. She was formerly the Deputy Chief Nursing Officer for Patient Safety and Innovation at NHS England and Improvement, and held the role of Director of Infection Prevention and Control, leading a national team in its response to supporting guidance development, implementation, and remobilization of NHS services. She was also responsible for protecting staff and patients during the transmission of COVID during that phase. Sue has 31 years of varied experience in nursing and has spent 24 years working in the NHS. I could say a lot more, but we're going to post Sue's bio in the chat. As from April 2022, Sue holds the title of Honorary Visiting Professor at Cardiff University. And in October 2020, she was listed amongst the Health Service Journal's 50 most influential people in health from a Black, Asian, and minority ethnic background. And December 2021 was awarded the fellowship of the Queen's Nursing Institute. She's also a trustee of the Florence Nightingale Foundation and is an FNF Alumma Leadership Scholar. But for us, Sue, you are one of the greatest role models as a Girmitya descendant, and we really look forward to hearing what you have to share with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Parminder. An honor and a privilege to be given the opportunity to share my story, or what I know of it anyway. Out of the millions of displaced people of Indian heritage, I'm very grateful to be the one chosen to share today. And I want to start by offering a massive gratitude to Professor Keshav, as without your commitment and dedication to tell the story of hardship, but despite all of that, to tell the story of successes has been exemplary. And I want to thank you for maintaining your commitment and herding us to this place. So thank you. My maiden name is Sumeshni Naidu. Sorry, I'm Sue Tranka, which is the married name, but Sumeshni Naidu. And the Naidu I wanted to share with you simply because I will come to the connection later on regarding my surname and what I didn't know about my surname for many years until I started to research who I was or who I am. So I'm of South African heritage, and I always believed that I was South African at heart. So people asked me for many years, where do you come from? And I'd say South Africa, with such levels of confidence that now I look back and think, what naivety. I did grow up in Durban, which is one of the cities, and then moved to Johannesburg for most of my life. I was very young when I moved out of Durban. I've lived in the UK now for 25 years, and I married a Greek-Romanian man, and I have a multicultural 14-year-old daughter. So, I'm doing my bit for globalism, quite frankly. I'm really proud to be of Indian heritage, and my family have retained and brought with us a lot of the Indian culture, including food, the dress, a bit of language. And yet I never connected the dots growing up. Interestingly, I would vehemently repeat, I'm South African. And then people would say, well, where's the Indian influence coming from? And I don't think I really took the time to connect the dots. And there's a reason why. And as you hear my story, you'll understand why I failed to connect the dots as a young child. I did later on, but it was a little late in terms of getting to hear and understand the experiences of my ancestors. So my grandparents spoke Tamil at home, and I was sent to a Tamil school and learned Tamil as a child. English is our first language, though, and of course we have 11 official languages, having come from South Africa and having grown up there. I think for me, when I first started to learn about my family history, it wasn't introduced to me in a way in which I could truly understand it. I heard the word indentured labourer, and then I started off asking and trying to find out, well, what does it mean? Where does it come from? Looked it up in a dictionary. I tried to understand how I could identify with that word that was anchored in my family. And I didn't really understand the very generally how it applied to South Africans. And that took me some time to understand. And in that, the reason I'm sharing some of this is because it's quite difficult growing up not knowing where you come from, believing you're of a certain ancestry and heritage, no one setting you straight or telling you why. And then finding out much later in life that actually there's a whole backstory to who you are. It's quite a difficult thing, I think, to process. And then you start to wonder about where you belong and are you really who you think you are. And I've struggled with some of that as I've grown up. So I got to, in my later years, to understand. I became more and more curious, I think, and started to ask a lot of questions about who we were, why we looked the way we looked. Surely we didn't belong with the rest of what I'd seen in South Africa, and I couldn't understand then why I was suddenly living in segregation either. So if I'm South African, and the indigenous people, the black people in South Africa, are segregated from me, why, I kept asking, and no one really wanted to. They'd shush you, as they do in our cultures. They'd shush you to be quiet simply because you were a child who they didn't want to share in your curiosity. They expected you to stay in your lane, I suspect. I started looking more and more into my historical background, trying to figure out how we ended up where we did, and how we came to be in such a beautiful country as well. I think I shared with you the feeling of not belonging, but I always felt I was looking in. I always felt like an outsider, and I couldn't quite work out why. Parts of me went through my life thinking, do I not belong in this family? But actually, in reflection, it's probably because I didn't really belong in the country. Although I identify quite strongly with South Africa. I have distinct memories from my grandfather speaking of working sort of plantations, and I think he talked little about his life. He talked little about his parents. He talked little about great grandparents, but I knew that from the stories that they were likely to have worked on farms or fields, and I put two and two together, and made that those were the sugarcane fields. And to be honest, like a lot of other descendants, I think from especially South Africa, I'm not sure what it's like around the rest of the world, although we're learning more now. families are not really open about their history and their journeys. They're not encouraged to engage in discussion of ancestry or heritage. So I think my earliest exposure to learning about our history was just bits of information I gleaned from listening to family gatherings, or when my granddad would sometimes share a little snippet. But I would always struggle to contextualize or place in time. I'd struggle to contextualize and place what it meant. And most times he wouldn't continue a story. He'd share something and then stop. So we stopped asking, I guess, as children and as grandchildren. But I pieced pieces of a story together from mum, dad, cousins, memories I've had. I continue to ask incessantly. Honestly, I rang my mum last night and said, I need to ask you something. She was like, I'm too tired to talk to you. But I continue to ask questions. It is a shame. It is a shame that no one explains their history or our history. And I can understand why. I have 3 children and I intend to not repeat the same mistakes. I intend to document my ancestry, my journey, what I know, and I intend to leave them a legacy so that they know who they are and they belong in this world. I suspect I understand better now what I didn't fully grasp then. And what I didn't grasp then was that despite the difficulties, the challenges, the hurdles they have experienced, my family have experienced, the displaced Indians have experienced, ingenuity really made up, and it's the makeup of Girmit's. Education became critical to success, and I saw and heard that through most of my life. But of course, surrounding that were the struggles that was always attached to the story. And I couldn't yet grasp why the strive for education until I started to understand my background. And now I know why my dad pushed me to university, pushed me to complete postgraduate education, pushed me to keep being better than I was yesterday, or better than I can be the day ahead of me. Whilst I find it difficult not to know, and I have found it difficult not to know about my past, most of my elders have now passed, like I said. I'm often left wondering where their curiosity was. What were they fearful of? Did they relive painful pasts? Who helped them? Who shared with them? Who took the burden off their shoulders? I'm minded that they had a history mired in sadness and brokenness, but I'm also reminded that they made such successes of themselves. And I'm searching, I guess, for something that I might never know, simply because I don't have elders, but I'm really comfortable in a space of starting to know more about who we were and who we are. I often felt a bit of an ache listening to stories, and I don't think I knew why, honestly, when they talk about uncles and aunts or people of past, and I didn't really know why, but there was always something there that made me think, what are they actually trying to tell me? Now I know there must have been just a history and of loss and reminiscence, I guess, and memories that were probably threaded with pain. This is my assumptions. It may not be true at all. It may be something completely different. But this is where I've landed with my research. But it wasn't all bad, There were clearly some successes within my family. My grandfather's brother had opened a little tea room, and I can remember being really little, like 4 or 5, and visiting, skipping along happily to eat a red cake and drink tea. I don't know if you know what red cakes are. They're those powdery things with lots of coconut on. They were a delight when I was growing up. And in the tea room, often men would gather and they would drink tea and swap stories, I guess. And I always would pry and then get my ear bitten off and smacked and told to go play outside. But I listened intently and I tried to piece things together whilst pouring over my syrupy and coconut-infused red cake, pretending not to listen, but actually desperately wanting to know what would they share that I could then put a bit more together for myself. didn't transpire into anything, but I continued to eat red cakes and peer through the door. My dad's first cousin actually has been helping me to piece parts of our history together, and I'm really intrigued. He's done a wonderful crest, an emblem of the Naidu family. It's beautiful, with laborers carrying all the sugarcane on their backs, and flags from where we've come from and where we are, and then a success part of the emblem. It's absolutely beautiful, and I hope to share it at the conference when I'm there. I was very, very curious about where I come from, as you can hear, and so I did something that probably most people wouldn't do. I undertook to have my DNA sequenced, so that I know where I originated from, because I was so desperate to know. I honestly thought it would say 100% South African. To my surprise, it really didn't. It said I came from a village in Tamil Nadu, and from Andhra, and my mom is Telugu and my dad is Tamil. So Tamil is the Tamil Nadu, and the Andhra is my mom's ancestry, and so my surname is Naidu. And so I thought, it's all starting to add up. Here we go. So I searched up, what does my surname mean? And I was like, what does it mean to be Naidu? And so from a Telugu Naidu, the meaning is chief, and from Sanskrit Naya, it means leader chief. And I was like, yeah, that absolutely speaks to who I am. I am a leader. I'm the chief. I'm it. So I thought that suits me best. But I just want to very quickly tell you that, the journey started in 1860 with ancestors landed in Mauritius, apparently. We don't know why they sailed to South Africa sometime later. I'm told my granddad came as a boy with his siblings. I understand he may not have had parents at that point. He lost them. He doesn't really talk about what happened to his parents. We don't know. I'm told they were offered great wages to move to South Africa and work the fields, and it didn't materialize, unfortunately. And in turn, it just created another generation of Girmits and broken promises. But according to the history records, what I could piece together anyways, around November 16th, 1860, a paddle steamer from Madras carrying hundreds of Indian laborers docked in Natal, Port Natal, and had gone on its journey through Mauritius into Port Natal. So clearly at that point somewhere my ancestors disembarked and started off life in Mauritius. The laborers were recruited in India, as Professor Keshav has said, and there was a number recruited from Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. So I'm pleased to at least have pieced that part of my background together. I am incredibly proud of my ancestral heritage, and I'm equally proud of the South African influence in my cultural positioning in life. I look at myself and I see a fusion. I see a fusion of culture, tradition, and heritage mixed. That's just infused into my life, and then and those of my siblings and others. We've traced through stories and memories, snippets of family, grandfather, mums, dads, cousins. But we've never been back to where we've come from, and we've never been able to find family where we've come from either. And I don't think we've looked in earnest, despite me doing the looking. I'm not sure the rest have. I would love to be able to travel back and step foot into the village from which we originate, just to feel that sense of belonging. And parts of me wonders whether when I step in, what will I feel? What will it do? Will I finally feel this is where I've come from, this is where I belong? I'm proud to be part of this project. I am a descendant of the Girmitya, and I'm a successful woman. I'm a leader, professional, and I'm so much more. But it is through them and their strife that I stand where I am today. And so, as they say, you stand on the shoulders of giants, and they certainly were just that for me. Although I don't know them, I'm eternally grateful, and they'll always be remembered with love. So my story is about the descendant, the journey, the joy, and the discoveries. Thank you, Parminder.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was just so profound. And yes, you are a tremendous leader. You are our role model. You're the first woman of color to be the Chief Nursing Officer of Wales and more. So we really honor you. We honor your memories. And we really appreciate you sharing very personally your story of the journey of looking at what belonging is, where belonging is, how belonging is. And, you mentioned that a lot of the older generation haven't and don't talk about these things. We come across this every day when we're looking at the Uganda nation stories, because as one elderly gentleman said to me, he said, "We've closed that box. Why do you want to open it?" And it's like the trauma of reliving some of that very traumatic experiences is just too much of an askance from us. So one of our commitments in making seldom heard voices come to the fore is that we have committed to working with people through their trauma to tell the stories the way they want to tell it. So I think it's really important that we capture all these stories for the present, but also for the future generations. So thank you. Thank you, Sue. And I have great pleasure in inviting our next speaker, Judge Ray Singh, who needs no introduction because Judge Ray Singh has been a name linked to everything to do with race equality. Judge Ray was the first ethnic minority judge on the Welsh bench. He was appointed as a deputy district judge in 1992, and in 1997 became the resident district judge of the Merthyr Tydfil combined law courts on the Welsh circuit. He has been a member of the Welsh Advisory Committee on Drug and Alcohol Misuse Act of the Judicial Studies Board, Family Court Services Committee, National Assembly Advisory Group, and the South West Wales Criminal Justice Liaison Committee. He's also a commissioner of the Commission for Racial Equality. Judge Ray has been a chair of many formal investigations, including into the reporting of the murder of Zahid Mubarak and the race equality in prison. Also the chair of the Stephen Lawrence Inquiry Report, which was set up by Birmingham City Council. I can go on. Judge Ray is a fellow of the Race Relations Committee, is the chair of Race Council Cymru, and is involved in many professional and public bodies. I don't know where you get all the time to do this, Judge Ray, but we are grateful. So it's over to you, and we're looking forward to hearing your experiences.
I can see myself in the corner there. There you
We
are.
can see you.
Nosweda, namaste, salaam alaikum, salom, sasrikal, salamat, bula, good evening. I'll stop there as far as greetings concerned because the time will run out. Thank you, Paminda, for organizing this, a very important conference as a prelude to the conference which Professor Kashyap is leading and has mentioned earlier on. I'm grateful to Professor Kashyap for organizing this. I'm sure we had something connected to each other because around 2010, I was talking about the same subject with the then Home Secretary as to why we do not recognize the Girmityas, the indentured laborers, yet we talk about the slavery because there's a lot of common themes between the two. And he agreed, but as all politicians, they don't have enough time to deal with this. So I'm very grateful to Professor Kashyap to have taken up this, and he has my full support in moving this forward, as has Sue, who has been so committed to this as well. My name is, I don't know what name has been put up there, but my name on birth certificate is Rameshwar Singh. And I will explain a little later, if I have time, as to how it got condensed to Ray Singh. As a young person growing up in Fiji, it was great fun mixing with very close knit family, at the same time, a very wide range of friends. I was particularly interested in finding out about where my grandparents and great-grandparents had come from and why, but never had the opportunity of talking about it with my maternal and paternal great-great-parents, except for my great-great Parnani, which is my mother's side of the family. But I had a very close link and relationship with my grandfather, paternal grandfather. And I was very, the information really came from him. He was Baba Shankar Singh, son of Raghunath Singh, son of Hari Singh. Baba and I would sit together with questions galore for him. He would sit there on the bed with others sitting on the floor, and he would recite Ramayana and Bhagavad Gita without looking at it. The history he outlined was that he and his best friend, Muslim Baba, who was a Muslim Indian, were young men looking for employment when they were approached by a gentleman, presumably a recruiting officer, and they were offered jobs with good money. They were to work on an island not far from the shores of India, from Bihar, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh area. Both these young men were allured with a promise of good money, privileges of coming home every week, 2 weeks, or monthly. Choice was theirs. Both decided to accept those mouth-watering offers and talked about surprising their parents and family by bringing home lots of money and settled for returning home once a month. Both sent messages through other friends to their families, telling them that they'd found a job and they'll be back in a month's time. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, they began to wonder if in fact they had been kidnapped, as the Leonidas, the ship they were in, seemed to be sailing forever and ever. By the time Leonidas got them to the islands of Fiji on the 14th of May, 1879, many had died. Many were suffering with ill health, not being able to fulfill their ambition to earn lots of money for the support of their poor families. Instead, they were taken to sugarcane plantation, where they toiled the land for 12 or more hours each day in cloudless sun, earning 8 rupees a month. The generous offer of paradise was nowhere to be seen. In the early days, their living conditions were appalling. I don't want to distress you. They worked hard despite being removed from their culture, family and religion, and amidst daily hours of rejection and discrimination. They made a home for themselves in Fiji. This is the story of the Indians, how they work hard and make home wherever they have been taken to, and latterly wherever they have chosen to go. Apparently, the previous recruits from China were not suitable to toil the sugarcane farms. There was no proper communication structures in place, leading to many Girmityas never, ever having the opportunity of either seeing their loved ones or having any communication with them. The story of my paternal grandfather and his friend Muslim Baba is one of tragic and heartbreaking, beginning of their lives in Batuanga, Suva. Muslim Baba's mental health took its toll on him. They were devastated not to be able to see or communicate with their loved ones. Many carried their memories of home, of their loved ones to their graves. My grandfather would stop me once I would start asking him pertinent questions about his family in India and why he left them. Why hadn't he gone back to see them? Why can't I see their pictures? But often I saw him wipe off his tears without uttering a word and looking up to the heavens. And as I write these words, my eyes are filled with tears. Despite their contribution to the economy and education and all areas of development of infrastructure of Fiji, the indigenous population never made Girmityas feel welcome and allowed them to call Fiji their home. They toiled the lands, but many never were able to own it, as the majority of the lands fell under the jurisdiction of the Native Lands National Trust. And as such, the ownership of the land lay with the chiefs of the villages. These hardworking men and women lived and toiled the lands at the mercy of the Fijian chiefs, many of whom were the supporters of people like Sitiveni Rambuka, who, as you all know, in the time to come, he brought the hatred and rejection of the indentured laborers to the surface, to his first coup to overthrow Seratu Mara's coalition government, which had begun to embrace the upcoming Indian politicians and forced third, fourth generation to leave or die, thus evicting them and making them yet another group of travelers, which Professor Kashyap touched upon. Many lost all their assets, businesses they had worked for, and to built it, and what their parents had invested, and found themselves exiting the beautiful islands, never to return, making yet another home somewhere again. As a child growing up in Fiji, a very, as Professor Keshav has mentioned, multicultural, multi-religious, multinational society. It was enjoyable and fulfilling. The Indians were all Indians. The Muslims were all Indians. The religious celebrations were celebrated by everybody. You go to Gurdwara, you go to a mandir, you'll go to a mosque, you celebrate Eid, you celebrate Diwali, you celebrate the Guru Nanak's, and so on. And as a child, I thought, if the world could be something like what I was seeing among these hard-working people who had been stolen, I use the word cautiously, from their lands and taken to colonies to assist the colonialists who were the owners of these sugarcane plantations and gold mine and so forth. So that is my memory of Fiji, of my grandparents and great-grandmother, and how they came to Fiji as indentured laborers. They were called the name, disparaging terminology, coolies. I stopped there, Parminder.
Thank you very much, Judge Ray. It's very emotional listening to you. It's we could really spend a long time just listening to your personal story, but within the personal story, you've given us a whole history. So thank you very much. And we're really proud of you as a Girmitya's descendant and our role model in terms of what you have achieved, but not only what you have achieved, but what you have enabled us as the younger generations to achieve. So thank you very much. And we really look forward to hearing more about the historical context that you've shared with us. It's a little bit like growing up in East Africa, in Kenya, where we're all just Indians. You know, there was no distinction between caste, creed, color, religion. And I only discovered that at as a young child coming into the UK and discovering, oh my God, people are, you know, having sectarian views. It was a huge shock. Thank you very much. I would invite David to say some concluding remarks, and I would just add a very big thank you for myself to Judge Ray Singh, to Sue Tranka, and to Professor Keshav, as well as all the contributions. Thank you very much. Over to you, David.
Indeed, thank you very much indeed, Parminder. And thanks to everybody for joining us tonight, and to the Commission staff who've been involved with the arrangements this evening, and of course to Keshav, Sue, and Judge Ray for the very powerful and fascinating stories. We hope to see you at our next talk. I gloi hoffwn ddiolch yn fawr I chi am ymuno â ni heno, I staff y Comisiwn am drefnu, ac yn olaf diolch yn fawr iawn I chi, Keshav, Sue, a Judge Ray am eich straeon pwerus a diddorol iawn. Thanks very much, and nos da.
Diolch yn fawr, nos da.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Parminder. Thank you, everybody.